Okay, welcome. This week we actually read two parashas. This week, parashas Behar and Bechukaisai. But the Sikha this week is actually just on the first parsha, Parashas Behar. Now, one of the concepts, one of the things that we learn about in Parashas Behar is the idea of ownership, property transfers, property transactions, and especially how it relates to Eretz Yisrael. We know that when the Yidden came to Eretz Yisrael, the land was divided amongst each of the 12 Shvatim. Each Shevet received a special portion. And if somebody sold their property for whatever reason to somebody else, then every 50 years, the Yovel year, all property would go back to its original owners. So actually, when a person bought property, it was really only for a maximum of up to 50 years, depending on how many years were left to the Yovel. And there are different dinim that come from this, and a lot of them are mentioned in this week's parsha about property, or depending if it's a walled city, a non-walled city belonging to Levium, etc., etc. But this week's Sicha, the Rebbe takes some halachas about transferring ownership, acquiring property, and gives us the background of the halacha. We're going to look at the halachas involved. And then the Rebbe gives a very beautiful lesson that we can learn from it in our Avodas Hashem, how we serve the Eibishter. So it's really a connection of the practical halacha and the avodah of a person, how it relates to even something like physical transferring of property. So before we go into the Sikha itself, I'm just going to look at, we'll look through the halachas. We'll learn some of the halachas, and then it will be easier to understand the Sikha. So this is from the Rambam, Hilchas Mechira. Rambam has halachas on selling property, selling things, including property, Parach of Bezach of Gimel. So one thing the Rambam says is, Ein Adam makne davar shalai ba la'olam. A person cannot acquire something that did not come into existence. In other words, you can't buy something that's not here yet. What does that mean? Rambam gives an example. Somebody who sells the fruit of his palm tree to his friend. In other words, they didn't grow yet. He has the palm tree and he says, I'm going to sell you the fruits that are going to grow from this palm tree. Yachal lachzar by, either one of them can renege on this transaction. Even after the palm tree gave forth fruit, they can renege on it, either party, because you can't sell something that was not in existence yet. Okay, so we have here a palm tree. A person says to his friend, I'm going to sell you the fruits that are going to come from this palm tree. And the halacha is that you cannot sell something that did not come into fruition. That's not there. It's nothing. It's not tangible. So therefore, it says not as if any transaction took place. That's number one. That's scenario one. Scenario two, the third line down on the chart. Makna adam haguf leperaisav. A person can transfer ownership of a property itself with regard to the produce it yields. This is not considered selling something that wasn't ever in existence. Because the property itself is in existence. And he's acquiring it for its fruits. So a person can say to his friend, I am selling you the tree for the produce, for the fruit that it will produce. So the tree is not being sold, but the tree only in relationship to the fruit that it's going to produce is being sold. And in that case, even though the fruit has not yet grown, halacha is that is a sale, that is a kanui, it is the transaction has taken place, and the person will receive the fruits that will come to be, because he bought the tree's potential for the fruit, and the tree is in existence. Okay, so here we have let's just review two scenarios. Scenario number one, a person says, I want to buy the fruit, or I want to sell the fruit from this tree that didn't yet produce. That is not considered a valid transaction. But if he says, I'm going to buy the tree in relationship to the fruit that it's going to produce, that is, in the future, that is and would be a valid transaction. So those are two scenarios. And the Rambam continues with a third scenario. Din ha-hekdesh, v'din ha'aniyim, v'din ha-nedarim, einai kedin ha-hedjet. When we're talking about acquiring property, there is a difference between something that is called hekdesh. Hekdesh means if somebody says that something is going to be given to the Beis Hamikdash. So in other words, he says all the animals that are going to be born from this, anytime a person says something is going to be given to the Beis Hamikdash, that's called hekdesh. And the thing, whatever it is holy. You cannot do anything else with it. So if he says this animal that I have in front of me I'm consecrating it to the Beis Hamikdash, that is called hekdesh, and the animal is holy. It cannot, nothing else can be done with that animal. It must be given to the Beis Hamikdash. And the same thing with aniyim, poor people. If someone says they're going to give something to somebody who's poor, in other words, tzedakah, v'din hanidarim, or if someone made a vow, whatever it is, einai kedin hedget. That is not like the transaction that we were talking about before. Those are not like simple transactions. The simple transaction of a hedget, of a regular transactions, we said, do not fall on something that has not yet produced, that is not in this world. You can't transact a transaction with something that is not tangible. But that does not apply, this halacha does not apply to something that someone says is going to be hektish, or for poor people, or for nidarim, or for vows. In other words, if a person says, She'ilu amar adam kol ma sheteled behem tihiyeh hektish, if a person says, this animal that I have in front of me, everything that is going to give birth to is going to be hektish, right? It didn't come to fruition yet. So according to the first thing, it would seem like, well, he could renege on it because it's not something that's tangible. But if he says it's going to be hektish, or if he's, in other words, going to be to the Beis Hamikdash, or if he says etnenu l'tzedakah, I'm going to give it to tzedakah, afal pi she'enai miskadesh, lefi she'enai ba'elam, the object itself does not become holy because it's not tangible. It wasn't in the world yet. It wasn't something that was there. But he still must complete his word. He must fulfill his word. He must do what he says. A person has to do whatever he vows or he says to do. Why? Because, so in other words, if a person vows or makes a neder or says that he's going to give something to the poor people, or he's going to give an animal that's going to be born to the Beis Hamikdash, those all have to be completed. He has to do it. He can't retract those promises. And it's not because the object itself became holy, because it wasn't in existence, but it's really because of the person's obligation, because the person obligated himself. And we know that if a person promises something, they have to fulfill that promise. So, so something that, just to sum it up, something that wasn't in existence cannot be consecrated, but the person still has the obligation to fulfill his words. And the Rambam continues and says, "V'hayil hadavar kain im tziva adam kishu shchiv meirav." Someone is very on his deathbed, and he says, "This tree that's outside my yard, if whatever it's going to produce, or whatever is going to go to the poor people, it goes right away to the poor people." Okay, just an example of showing how if somebody promises something, even if it didn't come into fruition yet, because of the promise or hektish or tzedakah, whatever it is, it does apply. Okay, now we know, the Rebbe told us many times, and we even spoke about it last week, how every halacha in Torah is also a hira'ah. It's something for us to learn from. Torah milashon hira'ah. And the Rebbe, it says that even from these halachas about transferring ownership, we can learn about our avodas Hashem and how we can improve our character traits and how to serve Hashem. So let's read inside. And this is in our inyan. Prate hadinim hanal bekinyanim. The specifics of the halachas when it comes to acquisitions. So we have number one, hachiluk bein hamaycher peres dekol bein hamaycher ilan leperesa. So there's a difference between someone who sells the fruit of the palm tree that's going to come later on, ubein hamaycher ilan leperesa, and there's a difference between the person who sells the fruit, the tree for its fruit that will eventually come for it, right? So he says someone who sells the fruit that's going to happen, he does not have to actually sell it, because you can't sell something that you can't acquire something that is not in existence. But if he says I'm selling the tree in relationship to the fruit that will come, then he is chayav. He has to keep that. And then we have number two, hachiluk, the division, the separation, or the difference. The difference between din hahajet b'kniyasai, the difference between a regular transaction that takes place, shein adam mitzvah lihikanes, because there's no biblical obligation, there's no mitzvah for a person to transact. There's no transaction, there's no mitzvah associated with transaction. Not there are mitzvahs associated with them. There's no mitzvah for a person to conduct transactions. If he does transact, he has to do it according to Torah, but there's no mitzvah that a person has to transact. But on the other hand, there's din hahekdesh v'din ha'aniyim. There's the din, the halachas of hekdesh, something that was consecrated to the Beis Hamikdash or to aniyim, to tzedakah. Shabahem ha'adam mitzvah l'kayim dvar, because in those things, hekdesh and aniyim, a person is commanded to fulfill his words. V'chein hu mechuyev l'kayim dvarei. Therefore, he is obligated to fulfill his words. Gam shanidan hu davar shlai ba'alam. Even if this was something about, even if he's talking about something that didn't yet come into this world, even if it's something that's not there, it's not present, it's not in existence, because he has this obligation to fulfill his words, he still has to keep them. Now, these things, the Rebbe says, these ideas, these ideas exist in the spiritual avodah of a person to his kind of the one who acquired him, referring to the Eibishter, obviously, that the Eibishter acquired us. Now, the general theme of Avodas Hashem is making a kinyan, a transaction. The person, us, Bnei Israel, we give ourselves and our possessions to Hashem. And it's evident of that when we do what Hashem wants. When our machshava, dibur, and maisa, when our thought, speech, and action are congruent with what the Eibishter wants, then we show that we have given over ourselves to the Eibishter, that we are makne, that the Eibishter is makne, the Eibishter acquires us, or we let ourselves be acquired by Hashem. And we see this lashon of acquiring a few times, many times. First of all, we say every day about the Eibishter, and we say in davening, Amzu Kanisa, we talk about the Eibishter having acquired us. We also say, I was only created to serve my master, or the one that acquired me. And it's interesting that we use the word kaini, the one that acquired me, and we don't use the word the one who created me. We don't say that I was only born to worship or to serve Hashem who created me, but we talk about Hashem who acquired me. So we do have this idea, and it also says listed in Pekavos, there are 5 things that the Eibishter acquired. Kana la'akadosh baruch hu, chamisha dvarim kana la'akadosh baruch hu. The Eibishter acquired 5 things, and one of them is the Yidden. So there is this idea that we are acquired by Hashem, and our job is to serve the Eibishter. Now, there are 2 levels that a person can be makneh himself, that a person can make himself be acquired by the Eibishter. One level is his guf, his body, and one level is the peiros, the fruits. And we're going to explain this in Ruchnis, how this applies. Okay. 1 second. Did I skip one? Okay. Okay. Hachiluk ben guf leperes ba'adam. The difference between guf, which literally means body or property in this case, leperes, or the fruits of the person. This is the difference between them. Guf, the property in the mashal we're talking about was the tree. Hu nafshay v'gufay v'kachaysehem. The guf of a person is his nefesh, his soul, v'gufay, including also his body, v'kachaysehem, and their powers and their kayach, what they're able to do, their abilities, which include kailel hasechel shabamayach. It includes the thoughts that are in a person's brain, the hamidais, and the emotions shabalev that are in a person's heart, the kol hakayches, and all the abilities, kailel kayach hamachshava dibur umaisa, including the ability to think, speak, and do. So that is the guf. The guf of the person, the guf we were talking about was the tree or the property. And here, as in the Nimshal, when we're talking about the Avaidas of the Avaida of a person to the Eibishter, the guf is the person's innermost self, which includes his neshama, his guf, and his thinking capabilities, and all the processes, his emotions, everything that makes him who he is. That is the guf of the person. So what's the peres? The peres, heim hapu'ulais sha'idei ha'evarim. The peres, the fruit, are the actions that are done through a person's limbs, uluvusha nefesh, and the clothing of the nefesh, which is the machshava dibur amaisa shaladam, the thought, speech, and action of the person. In other words, the actual doing, the actual coming out, the actual pu'ula of the thought, speech, and action of the person is the perais, are the fruits. Like the Chazal say, perais of shel tzaddik, mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim. The fruit of a tzaddik are the mitzvahs and the ma'asim tovim. So what a person is capable of doing, what a person is in his essence, that's the guf. And the perais are what he actually does, what he actually speaks, what he actually thinks, and what he actually does. And these things, these actions, thought, speech, and action, they grow from the seichel, and they go from the seichel and the emotions of the person. So the emotions of the person is the roots, like the guf, and then what grows from it, or what is comes from it, those are the peres, those are the fruit. So that's the difference between the guf of a person and the peres of a person, and in relationship to their, and we're going to see how that fits into their avodas Hashem. Okay. This is the difference between kinyan peres le kinyan aguf. Now we're going to talk about the difference between the acquisition of the fruit and the acquisition of the guf of a person to his master. The way a person is makes himself under the master, under the person who's acquiring it. In other words, obviously the Eibishter. So there's a difference between someone who is transacts and gives over his peres, his fruit, means his machshava dibur maisa, his thought, speech, and action, and the way a person gives over his guf, his essence, his whole complete self. Okay, kinyan peres, when a person is transacts or gives over his fruit, perushay, it means sheyehudi makne la'hakadosh baruch hu, a person gives over to the Eibishter, as kol hamachshavos hadiburim v'hamaisim shelo. All of his thoughts, speech, and action, all that is given over to the Eibishter. Shehem haperos shel hanefesh v'kachaseh uluvusha. As we said before, these are the fruits of the nefesh, of the soul, and the kachas and the levushim and the clothes. Those are the peros, the actuality of the potential. V'chol elu hu nizhar. He's careful with all of these things, with his thought, speech, and action, as hakatzach, until the last end, till the other end. What is he careful with? Shahamachshava hadibur ha'maisa shalai yu'laylam hetem l'rasad Hashem. He's always careful that his thought, speech, and action should be in time. It should be the way that the Eibishter wants it. It should be with what Hashem wants. Ubalash Tanya, as the Tanya states in Nagel Dargas Habeinani, when the Tanya is talking about the level of a Beinani. What's the level of Beinani? The Tanya says, like Avar Avera Miyavav, he never transgressed a sin in his days. V'lo Ya'avar Lailam, and he will never transgress. V'lo nikra lav shem Rasha, and he will not be called a Rasha. Afilu sha achas v'rega echad kol yamav. He will never be called a Rasha, even for 1 minute, his whole life. So that is what it means when a person gives over his peiros. A person gives over his fruit to the Eibusher. It means his machshava, dibur, and maisa, the action, that whatever comes out of his mouth, whatever he thinks about, whatever he does, is always what the Eibusher wants. It's in rhythm with what's supposed to be, and he never does any averos. That is the Beinani. That is the Kinyan Peres. That is someone who is makne his Peres, someone who gives over his fruit to the Eibusher. Okay, now we're on the second side, the second column. Aval haguf, but the guf, which is, we said before, is etzem hasechel hamidas v'hakoycha shalai, the essence of the sechel and the motions and the koyches. Loy nikna lakadosh baruch hu. This person, I'm sorry, this is a continuation of the Beinani. This person who was able to give over his peres, his machshava, dibur, maisa, he still was not up to the level of giving over his guf, the etzem, his essence. That has still not been given over to the Eibusher. What does that mean? Maichai v'libai, his brain and his heart, adayin einam b'nei chayin, they're not completely free. Mikol efsharis lemachshavos umidas rais v'taivis. His brain and his heart are not completely free from thoughts and negative midas and desires. They start from the heart and then go up to the mind. And so he, even though he doesn't act upon it, but still in his thoughts and in his heart, he still has some of these negative things that are going on. But he has ruling over the Yetzer Hara, so he doesn't act upon them. It doesn't come to his machshava, dibur, and maisa. It doesn't come to action, but it's still within him. It's still in his body. The ein hu meiniach lemidas harais, and he doesn't let his evil midas, v'hatayvos, and the desires, let's say, he doesn't let them come out, physically or actually in actuality. He doesn't let it come out and be expressed in machshava, dibur, amaisa, because he has complete control over that. That's what we said about him. He doesn't sin. He has complete control over what comes out of his mouth, what he does, all his actions, and even what he thinks. But his guf is still not on that level where it is completely given over to the Eibusher. So that's kinyan haperes. So the next level, the higher level, is kinyan haguf. That would be a tzaddik. Kinyan haguf hu avodas hatzaddik. When a person is able to give over his entire self, including all the kaiches that he has, all the powers, all the abilities that he has, and he's able to give that over to the Eibusher, that is the avodah of a tzaddik. He's able to give over to the Eibusher also the essence of his seichel and his midas, his emotions and his seichel. He's able to nullify completely the etzem of his Yetzer Hara. He's able to completely nullify the ra, which is within him in his seichel, v'hamidas haraish shabalev, and the evil midas that are in his heart, udekol ha'kayches, and in all of his abilities, until he reaches the point where he only desires good and kedusha, holy things. He doesn't have any desires for anything that's not good and holy. Because he has given over in this transaction the guf, his whole body, shall sichlai umidas shabalev, his whole heart and soul and his emotions and everything that he has is given over to the Eibusher. Then it's obviously that his fruit, which are the results of what's inside him, right? The way it's going to be expressed, everything's of course is going to be it's always going to be given over to the Eibusher. He's always going to only do the right thing because in his etzem he only has good and he doesn't have anything negative. So obviously all of his machshava, dibur, maisa, all of his thought, speech, and action are also all going to be only good things. He doesn't have to battle the Yetzer Hara to do anything. But Ma'aseh Dibur Machshava Neged Ratzon Hashem, to do anything that against the Eibishter's will. Because from the beginning he doesn't have in his heart any desire to do anything negative that's against what the Eibishter wants. So he doesn't have this battle, this continuous battle, which the Beinani has, right? The Beinani only conquered the actual physical or machshava dibur ma'aseh, the actuality of it, but he still has it within himself, and so it's always a constant battle with the Yetzer Hara. But the tzaddik doesn't have that battle because he already gave over, submitted his entire body to the Eibishter, and he has nothing negative within him. So he has nothing to battle. And that's why a tzaddik is called the Eved Hashem. A tzaddik is called the servant of the Eibishter. What does it mean when a person is a servant? A servant is kinyan haguf, when the person gives over his entire body to the master. That is a servant. And so too, the tzaddik gives over he conveys his essence, his whole body to the Eibishter, just like a servant to his master. Okay. So now we can understand how a person cannot acquire something that did not come into existence, like we said, the fruit of the palm tree that didn't yet grow. And we can explain how this works in the avodah of the person in the service of the Eibishter. Okay. Mi she'enai omed b'dargas kinyan haguf, someone who is not on that level of the tzaddik who gave over his entire guf to the Eibishter. Ella bekinyan peres bavad. He's only on the level of the kinyan peres, the Beinani, that he's able to control his machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh, and that he's able to give over to the Eibishter. Klaimas, as to say, hu yachol he kanes lakadosh baruch hu rak as hamachshavas hadibur v'hamaisim shaloi. He's able to convey to the Eibishter, to give over his machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, his thought, speech, and action. V'lo is haguf, and not the actual his essence. Etzem hasechel midah shabalev v'chulei, the sechel and the midas that are in his heart. But alav ladas, he has to know. The Rebbe is telling us that this kind of person who's not up on the level of tzaddik yet, but he has to know, he has his ability to rule over through struggling, through war on the Yetzer Hara. He can only rule over the things that he is dealing with right now. Just like a person cannot sell or do a transaction with something that hasn't happened yet, so too this person, this Beinani, can only give over to the Eibishter. He can only rule over the Yetzer Hara for something that he's busy with now, something that he's in the middle of now. 1 second, where am I? But he's not able to give over to the Eibishter something that didn't happen yet, something that didn't come to the world yet. What does that mean? So to explain this, if a person resolves, he makes a hachlata, in the future I'm going to do such and such, someone who is on this level, who only has given over his peres to the Eibishter, this is not considered a binding transaction. Why? Because his guf, his essence, is not yet given over to the Eibishter, and so he has to constantly struggle with the Yetzer Hara to prevent the Yetzer Hara from stopping him from doing the good deed, whatever he's doing. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and he might chas v'shalom not win over the Yetzer Hara. So therefore, he cannot make a hachlata that something's going to happen in the future if it didn't happen yet, because if he's not on that level of giving over his guf and only the peres, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So this transaction is not a valid legal transaction. So Hashem has gives a person who hasn't reached the level of kinyan haguf a way to convey the fruits that don't yet exist. like we just said, he can't do something in the future because it doesn't exist. But there is a way that he can do that. How? By conveying the property for the fruit. Like we said, a person can say, I'm going to sell you the tree for the fruit that it will produce. So too here. He, if he's not on the level to give over his whole guf to Hashem, he can give over the part of his guf that is in relationship to its fruit, to the machshava, dibur, umaisa, that of his thought, speech, and action. So to explain this, Avaida shel haBeinoni, the Avaida of a Beinoni, eina mubeles lelevush hanam shbilvad, is not limited to the clothes of the nefesh, only the clothing of the nefesh. Hainu, to say, every time a desire or a ratzon or will is awakened in his heart, he has to every time struggle and fight the Yetzer Hara to stop this desire, obviously something that's a negative desire, from spreading out to his machshava dibur ma'aseh, to his thought, speech, and action. Not only does that happen, when he struggles and he overcomes the Yetzer Hara and he doesn't let his taivas or his negative desires go out, reach out to the machshava dibur ma'aseh, what happens? This avodah, the struggles that he does, it also affects the midas and the seichel themselves, the emotions and the seichel themselves, his guf. Because he subdues, until it makes an impression, even what's going to happen in the future, the ra that's in his heart and in his brain. So even though he can't totally eradicate all the negativity that's in his guf, every time he fights the Yetzer Hara and every time he is successful and he's able to make sure that it doesn't go to his machshava dibur ma'aseh, it makes an effect on part of his guf, and that's what it means, the saying that he's selling the guf, the property, for the fruit that it's going to produce. So he has the way that he could still dedicate the fruit that hasn't yet been produced yet. And the Alter Rebbe talks in the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe talks about a Beinoni and says, "Like avar avera miyamav, he never did any sin. V'layavar la'olam, he will never sin in his life or forever, because of his present state, because he's able to rule over his Yetzer Hara. He is sure that he will never sin. He will be able to control his Yetzer Hara and not sin. Because the Beinoni has control over the emotions of the Yetzer Hara and over their influence, in other words, their fruits of the emotions, and the machshava, dibur, umaisa, that's why he can be assured that he will never sin." Okay. And this is the inyan of a person who is gives over, who conveys his guf for the perais in the avodah of a person. And even if a person is not on the level that he's able to change the essence of his midas that are in his heart, they shouldn't have any negative desires at all. Rebbe is telling us, anyways, he has the potential to subdue of his emotions, his character traits. He has the ability to overcome them, his negative taivas, his negative ratzon, when it comes to how it affects his machshava dibur ma'aseh, his fruits. Va'azai gam peraisav, and that way also his fruit, the machshava dibur ma'aseh shalai ba'u la'olam kinum l'Hashem, even the machshava dibur ma'aseh that haven't yet come to fruition, they are not yet in this world, they are also going to be kanoi la'Hashem. They're also going to be given over to the Eibishter. That's why he will be in a position that he will never sin, because he was able to give over the tree in relationship to the fruit that it's going to bear. Like we said, that is a transaction that does take place. And he does that by subduing his Yetzer Hara. And every time he subdues the Yetzer Hara and he doesn't let it get out to his Machshava Dibur Maisa, it affects the guf of his guf. And that is how he is able to affect even things, his Machshava Dibur Maisa, that have not yet even come into fruition. In other words, not everyone can reach the level of Eved Hashem, a tzaddik, someone who's totally give over his whole guf to the Eibishter. But everyone, the Rebbe says, is a shaliach, an agent. And we all have the ability to fulfill the purpose of the creation. The reason that we were all created was the creation was created. We were created to make a place for the Eibishter to rest in this world. And being that shluchai shel adam kamaisay, a shliach of the person is like the shliach himself, like the mishaleach, like the one who sent him. A shliach here means an agent. So just like we are the shluchim of the Eibishter to do the Ratzon Hashem, we are like the Eibishter. So the mitzias of the shliach, the mitzias of the agent, is like the mishaleach, is like the one who sends him. Just like this is not like a servant. It's not on the level of a servant. The servant is even higher. When a servant does something for his master, he is in place of his master because he, like we said before, he is totally kanoi to the Eibishter. He's totally he conveys his whole body to the master. So whatever he does, it's like the master is doing. A shaliach is only in the realm of the shlichus, only in the realm of the mission that he's doing. He is like the mishalech, like the person who sent him, whoever sent him. So everyone, every yid has the koyach to give of themselves to the Eibishter, to be a shaliach, and to fulfill the kavanas habriya, to fulfill the purpose of creation, to give over the property, to all of us, to give over the property, the guf, for the paris, for the fruit, and that way all the actions will be l'shem shamayim. All our actions will be for the Eibishter. When we do that, when we are able to give over our guf, our property, for the fruits that will come forth, our machshava dibur ma'aso, we're able to do that because we have the koyach of the mishaleach, the koyach of the Eibishter, who they sent us to this world to do the shlichus of making a dir Allah Yisbarach. Okay, Eizvav. Now the Rebbe is going to talk about this, the third scenario that we talked about the difference between the hektish and hedjit, the difference between someone who consecrates something to the Beis Hamikdash or to tzedakah and a regular transaction. So the Rambam is mechadesh. The Rambam tells us something new. And what does the Rambam say? Din ha-hektish enoi kedin ha-hedjit b'kniyaseh. When we're talking about the halachas of hektish, it's not the same thing as regular transactions. She'ilu amar adam kol ma sheteled behemasi hektish. If a person says everything that my animal will give birth to will become hektish, chayiv l'kayim devarei, he must keep his promise. V'yesh le'amar teichan hadavar b'avayda saruchane. So how does this apply to our avodah, our spiritual avodah of serving the Eibishter? The Rebbe is going to tell us. There are people who aren't even on the level of being able to convey their guf, their property, for the fruit that will eventually come out of it. Right? We said that's also okay, but some people aren't even on that level yet. And what does that mean? He has no ruling, he has no power over the guf of his midas. Not even the midas that are related to his fruit. So it would seem that there is no way for him to convey to the Eibishter his fruits that have not yet come to fruition, that are not yet in this world, right? We said if a person can either give his whole goof or the payers he can give if he's making the goof and then gives for the payers that are going to grow out of this property, he can give that. But if someone is not even on that level, it seems like there's no way for him to give his future fruits machshav diber ma'aser to the Eibishter. Ubemele, so then it would seem that every single time he has to start again with this struggle with the Yetzer Hara, in order that whatever he's doing, it should be the will of the one who acquired him. In other words, the Eibishter. In other words, he has to keep on doing it. He can't do it something for the future. He has to keep on doing now. But the Rebbe says this is only when we are talking about a hedgetz transaction, a regular transaction, talking about his neutral possessions, things that are rishus, things that are neutral. They're not holy and they're not negative. They're neutral. Things like eating, sleeping, things that we all need to do to survive, but they're neutral. This does not refer to something that's hektish, like we said before. Hektish is something holy. Okay, we said hektish literally means giving over something to the Beis Hamikdash, but we're talking about a person's fruits being hektish, things that are holy, Torah, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. So when a person makes a hachlata, when a person makes a resolution regarding Torah and mitzvahs, he must fulfill his pledge. Because as we said, it's not like a regular transaction. Something that has to do with Torah of hektish must be fulfilled because it's a vow. So to something that a person pledges, Torah and mitzvahs must be fulfilled. So even though this can't effect a transfer on the object, right? Because you can't have a transfer on an object that's not in the world yet. But the person has the obligation to do what he said he's going to do when it comes to something holy, something like to add in Torah mitzvahs. So he has the obligation, and because he has this obligation, Hashem gives him the koyach and the ability, and Hashem helps him to make sure he is able to keep his word. So when it comes to a hachlata, a good resolution, and something in Torah mitzvahs, we can give it over to the Eibishter by when we promise it, we do have to keep it, and even if it didn't come into fruition yet, but the Eibishter gives us the koyach and the help to make sure that it happens. Okay, and the Rebbe is going to explain this. Divrei harishus shel adam, the neutral things of a person, kshurim b'ikarim leteva gufay v'nafshei bahamis. Usually, those things that are neutral are connected to his nature and to his body and his nefesh bahamis, his animal soul. That wants whatever it is because it needs to live and exist, like we said, to eat, to sleep, the things that a person needs to be able to exist in this world. So all these things are neutral, but the nefesh alekis, the godly soul, is able to affect that these deeds should be done l'shem shamayim, for heaven's sake. But even so, even if they are done for a good thing, we're eating so that we can learn Torah, whatever it is, but it still remains, these neutral things still remain ma'asecha, your deeds, the person's deeds. There's something that is done because of the guf of the person, because of the person's body. But opposite this, Inyane Torah mitzvahs, the things that have to do with Torah mitzvahs, so not things that are divrei reshus, but things that have to do with Torah and mitzvahs. Those are actions that are from the beginning, from the neshama. And it's only that the Yetzer Hara tries to delay and to prevent the person from keeping the mitzvahs, but it's the neshama's realm. And the mitzvah is done by the neshama being able to subdue the Yetzer Hara until his Yetzer Hara becomes weak. In order that the neshama should be able to do the mitzvah. So the Torah mitzvahs, whatever we're talking about, learning Torah or doing mitzvahs, is the realm of the neshama. And the only thing that's preventing it is sometimes the Yetzer Hara is trying to prevent it. And so the neshama has to fight the Yetzer Hara to overcome the Yetzer Hara and subdue the Yetzer Hara so that the neshama can do the mitzvah that needs to be done. One second, I'm sorry. I copied that twice, so skip the first paragraph on the left column. It's the same as the bottom column. Okay. And this is the difference between hejait, the regular transaction, lehektish, transaction that is for something that's holy. When a Jew accepts for himself good resolutions, when it comes to things that are neutral, like eating and sleeping, like I'm not gonna eat, I'm gonna lose weight, etc. Those are hachlatas that have to do with neutral things. Knias hejait, those are regular transactions. It's because these things that we're dealing with are essentially usually dealing with the body and the animal soul. And this person doesn't yet have complete rulership over his body and his nefesh habahamis. There is no chiyuv and servitude for this kinyan, for this transaction, because this is not something that he has control over. But this is not true for something that has to do with something holy. Torah mitzvahs. They are essentially pu'ulos of the neshama. All we have to do is nullify the disturbance of the Yetzer Hara. The good resolution itself, because of the neshama, obligates the neshama, and it's like a sort of servitude. She must keep her good resolution because it's hektish, because it's holy. She must keep her resolution. Hakna, the acquisition, b'payel, b'chefsa shalasiyah, with the actual action. Because the Yetzer Hara could chas v'shalom disturb it. And so therefore we don't know that it's going to actually come to fruition. Aval legabe haneshama, but when we're talking about the neshama, because she is prepared in her nature, that's the nature of the neshama, to fulfill these inyanim b'payel. Because they are her pu'ulos, they're her actions. It's in her purview, it's in her rishus, it's in her, it belongs to her, it's in her, she owns it. Therefore, therefore, there's an obligation that she must fulfill her words when it comes to something the Torah mitzvahs, because this is her, she has ownership over it, and therefore she must fulfill her words. Even if it didn't yet come to this world, it's not something that's tangible, something that's here in this world. It's outside of this world, it's not here yet, but still she has the obligation to fulfill it because it's something hektish, something holy. And a mitzvah and a chiyuv, that obligation that is in Torah, it includes with it the help from above. So if the Eibshter gives us a mitzvah, he also, or a chiyuv, an obligation, he also gives us the help to go along with it so that we can do what we need to do. What's this help here? That the neshama should be able to overcome the obstacles from the guf, from the body. And she should be able to fulfill her hachlata, her resolution, in actuality. And the Rebbe finishes off, and It should be the will of the Eibishter, that through learning these halachas of acquisitions, Niske b'karov mamash, we should be zeicha very soon, l'kiyum hayud, to fulfill the nevuah. B'yayim hahu Yosef Hashem v'gaymer, that on that day, referring to a Mashiach comes, the Eibishter will continue, will add, l'knois eshar, to acquire the rest of his nation. Here we have again the word acquire. The kuyam mashenema, and it should be fulfilled what it says, ad yavar hamcha Hashem, ad yavar amzu kanisa, your nation that you have acquired. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yiknes Amay Bishlemus. The Eibishter at that time when Mashiach comes will acquire his nation Bishlemus completely. Gam Eshar HaKinyanim. And also when the Eibishter acquires us, he will also acquire all the other transactions, properties that he acquires. Shakana Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilomai, like it says in Pirkei Avos. Ad the Kinyan to Beis Hamikdash, Kinyan Echad, as it says, one of the Kinyanim, one of the things that the Eibishter acquires is the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, the third Beis Hamikdash, Sheibana Behar v'Yameinu Mamash, that should be built very soon in our days. So just to summarize, the Rebbe is telling us that we all have this ability to do only good, to make sure that our Machshava Dibur Maisa are appropriate, and even if it didn't happen yet, we have this ability to do it for the future when we're talking about hachlatas for things that are in Torah mitzvahs. The Eibishter gives us the strength to overcome the Yetzer Hara and to make sure that we do the right thing, that we can do the right thing, and this will of course bring Mashiach now. Just to say, next week in Mitzvah Shem we will not be having a class. There's a simcha, but Mitzvah Shem will be in the Beis Hamikdash with Mashiach.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much. This was not an easy one. Thank you.
No, it was not. Okay, thanks.